Atari VCS lands in living room.
Which is more important than Voyager.
Which is way more. It was a hell of a lot cheaper, I'll tell you that. A lot of people know this is the Atari 2600. Right. That wasn't its name until about 5 or 6 years later, right?
Jared? Right. Yeah, it was a few years later before the 2600. That was its catalog number, and that's where that came from. But the Atari VCS Video Computer System was its original name. It was also sold as the Sears Video Arcade, which was an alternately branded but identical piece sold at Sears. That goes all the way back to a sporting goods relationship they had when they distributed the Pong dedicated home consoles a few years before.
The games were called something different too. Literally, the same game would be sold under a different title.
Right, like Air Sea Battle was sold as Target Fun, but it was the same game. Even different pack-ins. Actually, Air Sea Battle was the pack-in for the Sears one. Combat was the pack-in.
I think I remember these in like the Sears catalog back in the day, where you would actually go to Sears. They would have the catalog.
That was
and of course, every kid
that,
would
right?
just jump to the
thing.
Yeah.
At Christmas time, you would open up the catalog and you would circle what you want. I remember that very vividly. And the Atari 2600 was always circled in multiple reds, right?
There's still things in that catalog I never got.
So importantly, though, this thing, it was designed to be manufactured cheaply. They wanted to make it affordable, and so it was one of the most Baroque and strange Frankensteinian designs ever.
It had the wood grain and everything.
Yeah, on the outside, but even inside, it was designed to be a machine that software engineers were going to do all kinds of strange things, and they far surpassed the expectations of the people that designed the hardware, which is why the things have had such amazing longevity.
Well, not just that, but video game systems up to that point were designed to run a single game.
Right.
And the big advantage that the Atari 2600 or VCS at the time had was that it leveraged the ROM technology that the Fairchild had pioneered previously. So now you could buy different games and plug them into this platform. Yeah. Like carts were born.
Exactly.
Carts.
So for me, my best friend had a Pong machine, a Magnavox Pong machine, and we would go over there and play that, and that was a lot of fun. And then another friend of mine had an Odyssey where you actually had the overlays for the TV, right? And you would play games on that. But then when the Atari came out, you were like, oh man, you can have 40 different experiences just by flicking a little switch on the Atari. You can pop in a cartridge and you can be playing, you know, anything from a combat, like a military game, to a space game, to a circus game.
Yeah, it's funny, when you bought it, you got that second controller. Like, you don't get that with the PS4 or some of the other consoles.
When you bought a system back then, you got stuff. You got a console, you got 2 joysticks, you got 2 paddle controllers, alternate controllers with it. So it came with 4 controllers and a game. And this was for about $200, which is pretty amazing. 3 notable games.
$200.77.
Yeah, no, granted, that's true. Inflation has had its effect.
Let's talk about the launch lineup. Because people talk about launch lineups today as if there's some sort of idealistic period when all these great games came out on the day that the system was released. That wasn't the case with the VCS.
Absolutely. A lot of the VCS original games were really bad, but there were 3 good ones. Combat, which is kind of the first deathmatch game.
That's the pack-in.
Yeah. Right, that's the pack-in, and that's tank versus tank or plane versus plane. Great 2-player versus game, lots of variations. The second one is Air Sea Battle, sometimes called Target Fun, which is a really nice kind of 1 or 2-player shooting gallery game with some versus modes. And the third one, Video Olympics, which is a whole bunch of Pong variants that let you use those paddle controllers. Those 3 games are, all 3 of them I played fairly recently, all 3 of them are still fun.
Fantastic.
Yeah, do they still have those later on effects?
They still do, but I like those sound effects.
Later on, though, with games like Warlords and Keystone Capers and
Adventure, we're going to be talking about a lot of these games coming up soon. I do want to talk about the credits controversy, though, because at the time, Atari didn't want people putting their names in the credits, and that alienated and discouraged a lot of early designers who then left and formed Activision, for example.
Activision and Imagic, and they came out and formed these third-party companies and created a whole new industry. And that all happens a little later on, but it's an important part of, the company started thinking of these as products. The people creating them started thinking of them as creations or art. Yeah. And that tension still exists in our industry today. But they wanted credit for these things they were inventing.